Norman MacCaig was a poet, a great poet. He lived in Edinburgh all his life, apart from a spell in Wormwood Scrubs as a conscientious objector during the war. Being a primary school teacher meant long summers fishing and walking in Assynt in the Scottish Highlands. Norman and I used to perform together, Norman MacCaig's poetry and Aly Bain's Fiddle. And I'm a fisherman too, so this film is about a trip to Assynt to celebrate Norman in the centenary year of his birth.
It's great weather to be singing.
When I was 16 in the high school, Peggy Grant, the English teacher, said, by next Wednesday I want you to write a composition on something or other, or a poem. And I thought, oh, well, poem's shorter. So I wrote an execrable poem and got 17 out of 20 for it. And that put the skids under me. Hear my words carefully. Some are spoken not by me, but by a man in my position. What right has he to use my mouth? I hate him when he touches you the wrong way. Yet he loves you also, this appalling stranger who makes windows of my eyes. You see him looking out. Until he dies of my love for you, hear my words carefully, for who is talking now?
I got to know Norman in the early 70s when I came to Edinburgh from Shetland to seek my fortune, so to speak. Some folk were a bit scared of him. His tongue could cut you like a knife. But he gave me a lot of encouragement. He was right into music, and of course we both loved fishing, something we had in common with poet and novelist Andrew Greig.
Shortly before he died, Norman told me his favourite place in the world was the Loch of the Green Corrie in Assynt, in the far northwest Highlands of Scotland. And he gave me a challenge. He asked me to fish there for him. He said, if you catch a fish, I shall be delighted. And if you fail, then looking down from a place in which I do not believe, I shall be most amused. So I went with a couple of pals after he died, and had such a time I wrote a whole book about it.
The plan was to repeat Andrew's pilgrimage, but this time around it was to be more of a celebration. So the ideal companion was another keen fisherman, a great fan of Norman's, and an old pal of mine.
What a state, look at this.
I was wondering what to say, but I think we'll just laugh.
Oh, pal, how you doing?
How Aly, how lovely.
Oh.
You'll never believe what happened. We were having a cup of tea with the production people, and I was talking about how much I like Edinburgh, and I said, I love them wee streets. I said, I don't know where they are, but there's a wee streets that lead down to the river with stairs coming down. And it's here.
That's where I live, yeah.
Aye.
Hey, man, nice to see you.
How lovely to see you, man.
Oh, great. Come away in. Come on. To my wee castle.
I just met your daughter.
Billy Connolly and I go back a long way, to a time when we used to share a stage with some of the greats of Scottish poetry. I think that was 1970.
I remember the gig very well. I remember doing it. I remember that we got it in the Traverse. The guy asked me in the Traverse to do it.
Lights.
Lights. I was always lights. And you were always evil.
And I'm evil. Norman is sweetness, bittersweetness, maybe.
Amy Jennerson and Aly Bain, evil. I can't help but bear myself.
Back in the 70s, poetry was top of the cultural agenda in Edinburgh, the so-called Scottish literary renaissance. If Hugh MacDiarmid was the godfather, Norman was sort of consigliere, holding court in the Rose Street pubs every weekend. Like Billy and me, the painter Sandy Muffet was just getting started at the time.
I think one of the great things about the poets, and I've often emphasised this, in comparison to the painters held soirees in Newtown apartments. The poets met in a communist pub. You know, that's, to me, that says everything. That's why, you know, Alan Bowell, John Bellamy, myself, that's why we always said that the poets led the way. They led the way for us. They led the way to a new kind of Scottish art. And that was what's so important about that. It's not just a kind of bunch of guys, having a laugh in a pub. It's much more important than that. That's where everything was discussed. New books, new poems, new paintings. Everyone that came to the festival, Sean O'Casey, Dylan Thomas, that's where they went.
Taking poetry seriously doesn't have to mean serious poetry all the time. Not in Norman's case, anyway. I was reading through Norman's stuff last night.
I've never seen that. I was reading through his stuff as well. That's a different book for me.
Come away and through here, and we're going to cook in a minute. But I thought that, being
John Brown and Queen Victoria. I wonder why you kept that one for me.
I saw the film.
I know. I remember you phoned me after you'd seen it, and you said, "Does great in it." Does great in it.
Well, there was great in it. But I thought it would suit you.
The hills behind Balmoral stare gloomily back at him. They're practising purple for the Queen's watercolours. There are mobs there of things like grouse and deer. She and her ghastly friends will deal with them. How familiar dare he be today? Is she going to be Your Majesty or Vicky? It's a tricky business, he thinks, and smooths his kilt. It's 2 inches too long. Buckingham Palace, he wishes he were there, away from the class ice and midgie picnics and these damn sniggering gillies.
That's brilliant.
Brilliant.
Oh,
He has a lovely wee greeting face quality that I love. He'd hit you with a wee aside, and then sneak to the side and do a wee smile to see how you accepted it. See how you were dealing with what he said. He'd test you all the time.
Test you. Always testing you.
Aye.
Always and looking at you to see what reaction you got.
And if you said, "Oh, I like that poem of yours about that," he would say, "What do you like about it?"
Yeah.
Right. And you had to pass the test. You had to know what you were talking
That's
about.
Right. You had
so
to
if you hadn't read it, if you were kidding on, you were elbowed, right? It's not like Freddie Anderson, the poet in Glasgow. If you didn't know what he belted, you were.
That's right. Wee Freddie,
And I like my poets like that.
Oh, no.
Because some of them are a bit opera cape and cigarette holder or black polo necks, You know that Edinburgh Festival kind of poetry. That alone, 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 alone. And there's always somebody at the back who goes, "No wonder."
Self-pity was never on the MacCaig agenda. He didn't look in for his poetry, he looked out. Fellow poet Douglas Dunn.
One of the things I value his poetry for is the quality of its observation. He writes about things that you, the reader, or I, the reader, think I can recognise. But in fact, once you've read the poem, you realise that you hadn't experienced that picture, that landscape, in anything like the same way. So he brushes the dust off your eyes. Or, as William Blake once said, "As a man sees, so a man is." Straws like tame lightnings lie about the grass and hang zigzag on hedges. Green as glass the water in the horse trough shines. 9 ducks go wobbling by in 2 straight lines. A hen stares at nothing with one eye, then picks it up. Out of an empty sky a swallow falls, and flickering through the barn dives up again into the dizzy blue. I lie, not thinking, in the cool soft grass, afraid of where a thought might take me, as this grasshopper with plated face unfolds his legs and finds himself in space. Self under self, a pile of selves I stand, threaded on time, and with metaphysic hand lift the farm like a lid and see farm within farm, and in the centre, me.
Billy and I have never actually fished together before, so Assynt is going to be a new experience. I'll be interested to see where Norman went, because he talked about it to me 1,000 times, but I've never been up there.
I think he's kidding. I think there's no fish in it. Yeah. I think the whole thing's a joke, that wee sleek-it smile of his. Because when he says, "I'll be smiling for that place that you think I don't believe in,"
yeah.
What's he smiling at? He's not smiling because you've got a big load of trout.
No.
He's smiling because you've got nothing.
Yeah.
That
You've
would be-
climbed up the hill.
That would be typical.
Because that wee smirk, that's what he's like. That wee
Smirk.
grin, that's the word.
Smirk.
That wee smirk.
Oh, there we go.
I don't know where I got them or what for.
Oh, God. That
That-
looks like,
that
that's a
wee-
black
that-
pennel, is it? No, is it?
I
Can't
don't know
see
what it is.
No, it's got a bit of red in it. It's like a wee gnat.
Oh, that'd be good. They're those wee hill lochs like these wee nothing flies.
Well, this loch is seemingly...
Anything that's like a black spider usually does the trick for these wee wild lochs.
The loch we're going to up, Norman's Loch, is seemingly crystal clear. So you didn't weight it because it's that small you can fish it from the bank.
Brilliant.
So that's what we'll try and do. And when we've finished that, we've got tents that we've got to sleep in at night, and it's going to be freezing. So that's why I'm putting extra chilies in the curry. I've got to tell you, I can hardly get you in the step. Billy's done more of this kind of thing than me. I've done a lot of fishing in my time, and there's a lot of rough country in Shetland, but no mountains. The way I see it, mountains are best left to sheep and goats. Still, we're doing it for Norman. Goodbye, Edinburgh. Goodbye, creature comforts. Can we not put it up in the van?
It's that old bugger MacCaig. Can you know a pick somewhere you don't need rucksacks for?
A few days before setting off, I'd had a chat with Norman's son Ewan, himself a keen fisherman and a fine musician too.
He was an absolutely ruthless and bloodthirsty fisherman. I mean, it's completely wrong to think of him wandering the hills of Assynt in a poetic haze. I mean, he was walking as fast as possible to the nearest loch where he could kill as many trout as he could.
That's brilliant.
And I was brought up to do that. Of course, he appreciated and loved walking through the landscapes.
Yes.
But it was the fishing that got him up out of his chair.
Ewan told me that back in the 50s, when Norman and family first started going to Assynt, it took them 23 hours by train and bus. No car, not on a primary school teacher's wages. 23 hours. It'll take us about 6. Plenty of time to sort things out for the task ahead. These are right, like Ortley flies and Shetland flies.
Yeah. And a pal, Mike Quinn, and he used to fish the waterworks at MacCaig. And he had a fail-safe attitude. He loved the dry fly, but when the trout, when they come into the surface, he would find a hedgehog and fling it in. He'd fling it into the water, maybe about 15 or 20 feet, and fleas would all come off the hedgehog.
God.
And the trout would go mad, and he would just plonk a dry fly in the middle of it. And he says hedgehogs are good swimmers. So this hedgehog would swim back and run away, and other fleas would jump off it. The trout would go crazy for them. How about that?
What sort of poetry did you write when you were a younger man?
Oddly enough, most people who write poetry begin by clearly and patently imitating Tennyson or Hardy or Auden. But I didn't do that, not because of any tremendous genius at all, but because I can't imitate people. What a gift. Non-mimetic MacCaig saved me a lot of trouble.
Because Norman had such a distinctive voice, whenever I read in black and white a poem of his that I heard him read, I can actually hear him speaking it. Byre. The thatched roof rings like heaven, where mice squeak small hosannas all night long, scratching its golden pavements, skirting the gutter's crystal river song. Wild kittens in the world below glare with one flaming eye through cracks, spurt in the straw, are tawny brooches splayed on the chests of drunken sacks. The dimness becomes darkness as vast presences come mincing in. Swag-bellied Aphrodites, swinging a silver slaver from each chin. And all is milky, secret, female. Angels are hushed and plain straws shine, and kittens meow in circles, stalking with tail and hind leg, one straight line.
The hawk knows all about it. Shaking there.
Getting a job at Stirling University quite late on in life was a big thing for Norman. He'd been a conscientious objector, and he always said that was a black mark against him as a schoolteacher. But Stirling made him a full professor, sort of without portfolio, freedom and status, OBE, the Queen's Medal for Poetry. He liked all that, but he didn't much like some of the dry-as-dust academics he came across.
You sit at your fat desk, starching your brains. You're the tone-deaf man in the orchestra. You're the frog who wound a wooing go.
What a job is this, to measure lightning with a foot rule, the heart's turbulence with a pair of calipers. And what a magician who can dismantle Juliet, Ahab, Agamemnon into a do-it-yourself kit of semantic gestures.
Tidiness is decent. Trains have to reach their destinations. But yours, that should be clattering and singing through villages and landscapes, never gets out of the shunting yards.
I think Norman was happy at Stirling.
He was, despite all that. He used to make a distinction between an academic and a scholar. He had a great regard for what he called a scholar, but no regard at all for what he saw as a career academic.
I think he liked people who focused on the poem, on the work at hand, and not on putting themselves in the foreground in order to demonstrate their own cleverness, and I think that's what that poem's about.
It is. It was written before he came to Stirling, incidentally.
He was good fun in department meetings. He didn't really say much, but occasionally his face spoke volumes.
Indeed. he was very easily bored. And I'm not sure that he would survive now in their present climate. These comments that he would put on students' report cards, that one where he says, this student was a mouse in tutorials. Not just a mouse, a very quiet mouse.
Does her level best to remain invisible and usually succeeds. I don't think that's allowed anymore.
No.
People would come up to him and say, I've written a book, Norman. And he would say, is it a good book? Kind of no answer to that.
So we're going to meet Andrew Greig here in Liverpool.
Yes.
And I'm not even sure if I've met him before. Because the funniest thing is he dropped his book off in London. That's the reason I'm here. I read the book, I loved it, I wrote to him. And then he wrote back and said, would you like to come on the fishing trip and be part of it? And of course, I said I'd be delighted. And he's a lovely writer, I think.
Oh, he's a great writer. And it's also, the fishing bit really got me interested as well.
Absolutely.
Because I heard Norman talking about fishing up here all the years I knew him, but I never went fishing with him. So this is kind of a payback thing for me.
When I go up, as I do every summer, to Lochhead, Assynt, for 10 weeks, the stuff is there. House to Venetian blinds, and there it is. I never write a thing. But I fatten my camel's hump and feed on it all the winter, quite unconsciously. I never say, there's a skinny rosebush, it'll make a nice skinny poem. But sitting here, years later maybe, that skinny rosebush will scratch my mind and demand an utterance, but not by conscious choice at all.
Hey, this is Billy. It's nice to see you again.
Hello, Andrew.
It must be 20 years.
I know, we were just talking in the
Backstage.
car. I couldn't mind if I'd met you, no, but I thought,
20
well,
years
obviously
ago.
I've met you because of the letter and everything. But
It was backstage at the Travis after Aly and Norman had one of their shows.
Our rendezvous with Andrew Greig was at Ullapool, gateway to the mountains and lochs of Assynt just a bit further north, and our particular target, the Loch of the Green Corrie.
we weren't pals or anything. I had him pointed out to me before.
I just remember you sheer open-hearted enthusiasm.
Oh,
He said,
yeah.
that was magic. Do you think that was magic? And I said, yes, it was. It's great.
But thanks for sending me the book.
Glad you enjoyed it. I'm
It's
really
the
glad.
funniest thing is I was telling the lads earlier, normally I get these books backstage and I go, oh yeah.
As a young man, Norman had cycled all over Scotland and learned a lot. Not just about flora and fauna and landscapes, but about people too. He wasn't what you'd call political. He used to describe himself as a Zen Calvinist, but when he started coming to Assynt, he immediately sort of clicked with the people there, or what was left of them after 100 and more years of clearances. And there was one man in particular, Angus Kenneth MacLeod, A.K. MacLeod.
I had the grace to meet a man called Angus. Who made me almost not ignorant. What I mean is he taught me a hell of a lot about the usualness of the extraordinary. Or if you like, the extraordinariness of the usual. He was a clamped down, intellectual, hard-nosed visionary, in the sense that he saw what was there and didn't pipe dream about it.
A.K. MacLeod died in 1976, but at Inverkirkig we met his nephew, Angus John McEwen. Andrew wanted to know more about the MacLeod-MacCaig relationship.
Norman had 3 photos on his mantelpiece. You probably remember these ones. One was Hugh MacDiarmid, Chris Greig. They were great friends and he was a great poet. And then there's a lovely one of Ian Crichton-Smith and Solly MacLean and Seamus Heaney and Norman all standing facing the camera with their arms around each other, looking like a bunch of happy school kids. But there was one other picture of this little one, about this size, of this man in a proper dark suit standing outside a church, it looks like, with his hands on his hips, full of mischief. And I said, who is that? And he said, that's A.K. MacLeod. And he said to me, I loved that man. Not like that, you understand, but I loved him. Now, coming from someone like Norman, quite reticent, that's a really powerful thing to say.
Yes.
I loved that man. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely, yes. It was just the fun that they had. They warmed from each other. It was just and it was either topics of conversation or doing something practical. But when Angus got going, I mean, he would follow, you know, and it would be rather like Angus, you know, the kind of desperate Dan with the stubble and looking, you know, out in the hills, and Norman used to grab you sometimes in the early morning, 5:30, and say, when we were going to fish after a long night's Cayley somewhere like that, we'd get some salmon, and he'd grab you, he'd say, look at that man, look at that, look at the way he moves. And he did, he glided over the ground, really.
A.K. MacLeod. I went to the landscape I loved best, and the man who was its meaning had added to it met me at Ullapool. The beautiful landscape was under snow and was beautiful in a new way. Next morning, the man who had greeted me with the pleasure of pleasure vomited blood and died. Crofters and fishermen and womenfolk, unable to say any more, said, "It's a grand day, it's a beautiful day." And I thought, yes it is. And I thought of him lying there, the dead centre of it all.
In these Cayley evenings, what was Norman's contribution as a rule?
It was ginna where I do, I would flee awa the new, with my neb to the lowlands and my wings beating steady. And I wouldna rest a fit till it gloaming. I would sit wherever neighbour doos on the lums of Balgeddy. And it was all this moth-like softness that he was
That's
coming.
delightful. Ginna what I do. Oh, how good is that?
Very, very good. And he'd just do that, or he would say, tomato ketchup, you know, when at first I shake the bottle, none comes out, and then a lot will, you know, and then what porridge used to do, he used to go, Achlty bui, bulliu, bulliu. He would do wee things like that.
Lovely.
He would.
Norman couldn't stand the pipes and drums of military parades and Edinburgh tattoos, but he loved what he could call classical pibroch, the Gaelic music Alan MacDonald is a master of.
Pibroch, I make you a man who could shake hands with Bach and talk with him over a glass of Rhenish wine. You would walk in with your sack of images that are brightly dark and darkly bright, and Bach, emerging from a labyrinthine fugue, would greet you with warmth and pleasure. He'd pour the Rhenish wine.
He was very strong in his feelings about music, and he seemed to love Bach above all.
Well, it was almost
and
like...
Pibroch.
Yeah, and Pibroch, but it was almost like Bach was like Norman. He was playing with notes and playing with, like Norman was playing with words, and not too emotional, but very, very clever. Sometimes I'd be playing away, and just him and I, and he'd grab my bow, rubbish, or something much stronger. It used to drive me mental. You're playing away there quite happy, and then you're playing rubbish, something else. Don't like that tune.
Aye. And that was
a boredom threshold.
Oh, thanks, Norman. Great.
People should do that much more often.
There'd be grave wings beating in that room, and happy silences smiling to each other. When you left, you'd return to your crystal land of bogs and coloured rocks. And Bach, stretching his elbows sideways like wings, would fold them again and go down into the labyrinth, where he's never lost, seeking, like you, the minotaur that will crouch beside him with its heavy horns and its beautiful golden eyes.
He said to me that he would give up his poetry if he could play the fiddle properly. And I said, well, I would think about it if I could write poetry like him giving up the fiddle, you know. But then I think he really wanted to. He really wanted to play the fiddle, and he loved music. He just loved music. And whether he really meant that or not, I don't know, but he often said to me I would give it up if I could play the fiddle. And so maybe he was a poet that wanted to be a fiddle player. And
it's a great statement, though, isn't
It's
it?
a big statement.
But he loved music. He really did love music.
Well, he was fascinated by it. He thought it was the greatest of the arts. And he learnt the fiddle or the violin, I suppose I would call it, as a child or an adolescent. And he never took it very far, but he was able to play duets with me and with my sister. He couldn't play above the first position, as he had an absolutely rubbish old fiddle. But he was always particularly fond of Baroque music. And I think that is related in some way to his own sort of intellectual preference for things that were clear, simple, and direct, even when intrinsically quite complicated, as with Bach.
That's where we're going.
Have you
We're
gone
walking
in?
through that wee pass there.
No, we're going round up over the Bialach and then coming at it from the side.
Are we going into that cloud?
Probably, yeah. Unless the cloud lifts. It'll be, I don't know, 2.5 hours.
Well,
You'll be fine.
I reckon if Norman is up there looking down on us, he's ending himself at the moment.
Absolutely. He's trying to watch the freckles coming off your knees, Aly.
I'm beginning to regret this as well.
Let's go.
Let's do it.
Daylight's burning.
I don't know, I feel like I'm skiing with these things instead of walking, but look, Billy, we're first puddle.
Oh, God. I think so.
water everywhere today.
We've got Cathal MacLeod with us as a guide. Cathal knows these Assynt lochs like the back of his hand. He's written a book about them, and he reckons that where we're going, the Loch of the Green Corrie, is a pretty tricky place to fish.
Now, you see that wee step? That was a fish tail. I learned that at the Denison Parley.
I remember Norman telling me he started coming to Assynt because it was the place on the mainland that was most like his mother's native Hebridean island, Scalpay.
I think the Gaelic side is the side that produces the poetry, if it's poetry. At least thinking of my two parents, one of whom was a mother from Scalpay, father from Dumfries, it's certainly she spoke in images and metaphors, so that it was impossible for her to be angry, because as soon as she started baring her teeth and wielding knives, she said something so extraordinarily funny in an image or a metaphor that the one who was being angered at burst out laughing. And being a risible Gael, she earthquaked seismographically into laughter all on her own.
She was buckets and water flouncing into them. She was wind pouring wetly round house ends. She was brown eggs, black skirts, and a keeper of threepenny bits in a teapot. Aunt Julia spoke Gaelic, very loud and very fast. By the time I had learned a little, she lay silenced in the absolute black of a sandy grave at Luscantire. But I hear her still welcoming me with a seagull's voice across 100 yards of peat scrapes and lazy beds, and getting angry with so many questions unanswered.
This is about the steepest part of it we're on, isn't it?
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, once you get over the Bialach, there's another bit late on, it's a bit of a push-up. I mean, Norman always said it was a long way up and hard going. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that was so special about it for him, because he hadn't been up there for 20 years because of his heart.
Yeah. Well, I think it'd be just as hard coming down this place.
Yes.
Hard on the knees.
Well, there's a poem about that.
Yeah. Yeah, there is, isn't it? Yeah. The climb's all right. It's the descent that kills you. Knees become fists that don't know how to clench, and thighs are strings in parallel. Gravity's still your enemy. It drills you with your own backbone.
Look, Daisy, I'm going for a trip.
No, he would be. That's part of him, isn't it?
There's Bialach down there. And you're not getting a cast on here today, because we have to go right up below that ridge where the snow is.
Right over there?
Over there, Aly, I'm afraid. We leave the path just up at the skyline over there, and we follow the ridge out to the Green Corrie.
Wow.
How does that sound?
Well,
pretty terrible. Why don't we fish here?
So when we made it this far, you
only ever take small fish out of this thing.
Small fish can seem very large when the loch's far away.
There's not that many people anymore that can pronounce the Gaelic names of all these hills and lochs. That maybe makes them all the more romantic, but Norman would have none of that kind of thing.
Gaelic mode is very formal, classical and contained in all the modes of art, sculpture, poetry, name it. And this myth of the sentimental, wild-haired youth wandering in mists looking for his lost love, who meanwhile is marrying a seal or something, is absolute nonsense, spewed up by that frightful man, Mr. Arnold, in the last century. Celtic twilight.
You can see in the kind of hardness of the landscape why it was Norman was so dismissive of the Celtic twilight.
You have to slow down every now and again for the audience.
MacCaig was a poet whose poetry was about what he could see in the real visible world and also hear. Synesthesia, I think they call it, in which hearing and seeing are part of each other. And his poetry makes that very clear. This poem is called Movements, and it's about the movements of various creatures, starting with the skylark, soaring from one level to another, and ending in the dust. Movement. Lark drives invisible pitons in the air and hauls itself up the face of space. Mouse stops being comma and clockworks on the floor. Cats spill from walls. Swans undulate through clouds. Eel drills through darkness its malignant face. Fox, smouldering through the heather bushes, bursts a bomb of grouse. A speck of air grows thick and is a hornet. When a gannet dives, it's a white anchor falling, and when it lands, umbrella heron becomes walking stick. I think these movements and become them here in this room's stillness, none of them about, and relish them all, until I think of where, thrashed by a crook, the cursive adder writes quick V's and Q's in the dust and rubs them out.
But ladies wanted to mother him and look after him.
Rough country, all right. You and MacCaig told me his father used to think nothing of 20-odd miles a day.
And he just soaked stuff.
Just a few more yards to go.
Well, we've earned it.
And we're there. Well, we're going to see the best view there is from this top part of the mountain. Look at it. Away far over. That's away into central southern near Lairg, near Loch.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's the distance.
So we're seeing a long way away now.
Long way off.
We're almost seeing to the east coast. Yeah.
It might be a long way to you, but it's nothing to me.
Up here you think of Norman seeing the same big mountains and landscapes opening up. But what he had a special eye for was wee things, like birds and frogs.
Just keep forging ahead.
I love the way that Norman writes about frogs and toads, and the way that he puts the frog and the toad at the centre of his poetry. I think it's very fitting and very MacCaig-like, and it captures something of the modesty of the man. Seems absolutely fitting to me. And he picks this tiny, tiny creature and again makes us, the readers, see this tiny creature very differently. Toad. Stop looking like a purse. How could a purse squeeze under the rickety door and sit, full of satisfaction, in a man's house? You clamber towards me on your four corners, right hand, left foot, left hand, right foot. I love you for being a toad, for crawling like a Japanese wrestler, and for not being frightened. I put you in my purse hand, not shutting it, and set you down outside directly under every star. A jewel in your head. Toad, you've put one in mine, a tiny radiance in a dark place.
Gentlemen, the Loch of the Green Corrie. That's all yours.
I don't think I'm able to fish now I've got you. But it looks great. But of course it'll be the far bit where I'll be fishing.
That's it.
That's it.
Keeps a lot of secrets in there, that Loch does. So we'll see if we can explore and get some of them out of it today.
Well, it's a lovely wind, isn't it? Lovely wind for it.
Wind.
Where are the fish? In the bigger bit over there.
Well, Cattle will take us to the fish.
I'll do my
Personal
best.
introduction.
I'll do my best, guys.
Right.
God, it's lovely to look on it after all this time, reading about it, and talking
It's all
about
real.
it.
Yeah. We've done our work, and now it's up to you to produce the goods.
Oh, that's easy.
See Norman up there? Stick it in.
Well,
Trout fear me.
I'm determined we'll get the last laugh. I'm determined.
Okay.
He's dragged me all the way up here and I'm not come here for nothing. That's you.
Well, I've seen it. I've got off the idea. I'm away home.
I've chosen a poem that's unusually nostalgic in style for MacCaig. It's from his old age. He's sitting at home and he's thinking about the river Kirkig and Assynt and the mountains that lie upstream from that. Sargasso Sea. Tangled in weeds, far from home, in an ocean I've nothing to do with. How I envy the elvers that leave their Sargasso and drift across the Atlantic. So many will find the river I know best. How eagerly they swim against its rushing torrent that brings them news from high places I once visited long ago.
It's a wee blood knot. A single blood. And then get a wee snick of this. Done. That's one. We're going to tie up 3 of these. I'm going to put a black pennel on him. It's another fish I've never used, another fly I've never used in my life. But I read in a book by a man not a million miles from here that it works up here. With that wind and my cold fingers, it's not making it any easier. Could Norman know like Jamaica or something?
They come very quickly, very easily, pretty often without any corrections at all. People say, how long does it take you to write a poem? And I say, 2 fags.
As he aged, I began to think of him as like a very good split cane fishing rod. Kind of dry, perfectly balanced, nimble, and alive and fresh at the centre, and full of flex and full of angles. But he seemed to have direct access to the word hoard, as it were. The poems, there's no fuss, you're into the middle of them straight away, and they don't seem to have any designs upon you. They're lyric poetry, unashamedly.
I think if he was here today, he would be thinking what I'm thinking, that it's a bit, maybe a bit cold. The wind is good, but the weather's really changeable, and trouts, they don't like that. They like a warmer, dull day. And today it's showers, and they don't like rain much either. So when it rains, they tend to go down. But you never know.
I'm using my cane rod. I did it for Norman. I thought he would like the traditional thing. I don't know what he fished with himself. Probably fiberglass or something. But I talked myself into believing he would like the more traditional split cane rod. But they're so different from modern rods. The action is slower. But it's kind of nice. But you have to get used to it again after using the more modern stuff.
This is a poem called Small Boy, written towards the end of MacCaig's life. I heard him read it at an 80th birthday celebration, I think in the Assembly Rooms in Edinburgh. And I loved it the minute I heard it. And I was sitting beside his wife, Isabel, and I looked at her and she nodded at me in a way saying the same thing. It's completely simple, makes no attempt to make a big statement, but it goes straight into poetry. Small boy. He picked up a pebble and threw it into the sea. And another, and another. He couldn't stop. He wasn't trying to fill the sea. He wasn't trying to empty the beach. He was just throwing away, nothing else but. Like a kitten playing, he was practicing for the future, when there'd be so many things he'll want to throw away, if only his fingers will unclench and let them go.
There's a haunted kind of feel to it. Don't know what it is. Where the scree comes down there, and you feel as if you're being watched sometimes. You often get that in the Western Highlands. The feeling that you're not alone. I don't know what brings that on. It's obviously nonsense, but sometimes you get the distinct feeling you're not alone. I don't mean like there's people around you. You just get the feeling that you've been watched from a distance, kind of checked out. and the snakery that you're casting. I didn't notice Aly's casting. I was going to check him out so that I'll laugh at his expense later. Is he any good?
As long as I catch one before Billy, see, that's it. That's it. I can't have a welder beating a joiner, can
The breeze failed, and a million glitters smoothed to one broad blaze. You can see that. Got a million glitters, and if the breeze does stop, it just goes wide. Isn't that a beautiful opening? You've got scraps of this Norman poetry. If anybody comes to Assynt who knows his poetry, it's like living inside his skull.
Any luck?
Nothing, no sausage.
What are you doing wrong?
Fishing. I got an enormous fancle
You're in a
with
right
three
old
flies,
fancle,
so
dear.
I just put one on.
Oh, well, that's a good idea.
I just put...
It means one fancle instead of two.
Aye.
Did you see any fish?
Nothing. No.
Nothing? Aly saw a good trout over there.
Oh, he's lying.
Probably is.
He's a born liar.
Probably trying to wind you up.
Fiddle is a fiddler, we're all like that.
True.
It's a devil's instrument, you know.
That's good fish in here, though. There's no good excuses. There's a nice breeze blowing. It's cold, but I still think that we're in with a chance of getting something. I'll have to go and get my own fishing rod out and show you boys what to do. Like that.
Aye, away you go. Gaze piece.
No fish, but I'm catching memories all right. Memories of Norman. It was Delina McLennan, the Gaelic singer and actress, who introduced us. It used to be either at her and her husband George's house or Norman's own that we went to after the pubs closed.
I first met Norman in 1958, so we had a long friendship over the years. And one night in particular I do remember was in Norman's house, and Hugh McDermott, whom he always called Chris, and they were flighting, just going at each other, hammer and tongue. And I was sitting on the couch between them, watching, you know, and listening. And Chris was putting Norman's poetry down. He was saying, all you do is write is trite rubbish, he said. I said, when I go, I'm going to leave a wealth of poetry to the world. When you go, Norman, you're not going to leave anything of value at all. To which Norman quickly replied, but Chris, I'm not going. This is one of my favourite poems of his, called So Many Summers. It reminds me of the decay around the villages in the islands where I come from. Beside one loch, a hind's neat skeleton. Beside another, a boat pooled high and dry. Two neat geometries drawn in the weather, two things already dead and still to die. I passed them every summer, rod in hand, skirting the bright blue or the spitting grey, and every summer saw how the bleached timbers gaped wider and the neat ribs fell away. Time adds one malice to another one. Now you'd look very close before you knew if it's the boat that ran, the hind went sailing. So many summers, and I have lived them too.
You can see why Norman liked this loch, because it isn't simple. You know, he would like a loch that you might come here 50 times and catch nothing. That would be what he would like. He would just like that. Nothing straightforward, not like normal people. You walk like 60 miles up to this place. It takes like 3 hours to get here, and then the chances of getting anything is almost zero. Well, he just loved that. And he's probably sitting up there at the moment just killing himself, laughing at me down here. Stupid boy. So I could just see him.
Silver moon, with my banjo riding tune. My heart is I love no one but you, my Dixie darling, my Dixie queen. Dixon line, down where the honeysuckles are entwined, there's where my heart is roving, there's where the daisies grow. Ladies of the north and the gay finery, dancing around in society, singing songs of Dixie darling, where I wanna be. My Dixie darling, listen to this song I sing, beneath the silver moon, with a banjo riding tune. Is ever true. I love no one but you, my Dixie darling, my Dixie queen. Oh la 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 little la da dum dee dee la ma dee da da dee dee dee.
I remember particularly one night I spent with Norman. It would be in the 90s. It was after his wife died, certainly. I think it was 1990 she died. And I really got an impression with Norman, you know, that he really missed his friends, you know, as well as his wife. There was some people like McDermott and that he missed that intellectual companionship and the shared passions that they had. He just, you know, it was just kind of saying, well, the trouble with living so long is your friends begin to die. But anyway, for some reason, there's this poem from London to Edinburgh where he talks about that sense of growing old and being aware of it in a completely, not particularly witty and certainly not sentimental way, but just there's no jiggery pokery. It's just a reflection. London to Edinburgh. I'm waiting for the moment when the train crosses the border and home creeps closer at 70 miles an hour. I dismiss the last 4 days under friendly strangers into the past that grows bigger every minute. The train sounds as urgent as I am. It says home and home and home. I light a cigarette and sit smiling in the corner. Scotland, I rush towards you, into my future that, every minute, grows smaller and smaller.
Well, we had a great night last night. We had Billy played the banjo and Andrew sung a song and I played the fiddle and we had a wee campfire and then we went to bed and froze to death half through the night. And Norman was very precise with words, and the word for today is optimism. Because if you look, I've never been fishing in a blizzard before, and but we're optimistic that we'll do something today. God, it's freezing. Freezing. I've given up camping and fishing and everything after this. And all debts are squared with Norman. That's it, finished. All debts are squared with him after this, dragging me up with 2,000 feet into a blizzard to fish in the Loch that's dead. No, that's it.
I think there were maybe 2 Normans, and what made him a great poet was bringing the 2 together. Assynt days and Edinburgh nights, Saturday afternoons too. The Orkney poet George Mackay Brown was often there.
Norman MacCaig, Milnes Bar, Rose Street, Edinburgh. A Saturday afternoon in 1956. Sitting here and there about the unlovely tables, Norman MacCaig, Sidney Goodser-Smith, Tom Scott, Robert Garrioch, George Campbell Hay, Alexander Scott and other bards. whose lyrics scratched on the backs of envelopes would never fly into books. A cry on the steps, "Chris, he's here!" and the bards rise to greet their king, Hugh MacDiarmid, just off the bigger bus. This Orkney bard sits alone. He is too shy as yet to visit the bard's table, enough to look at them with longing. Their words have flown out of books to sit singing on the branches of his blood. And now, a few days since, the last of those poets is dead. MacCaig, he with the head of a Gaelic chieftain, and the courtesy, his tongue an edged and glittering dirk, against whatever is ill-made and worthy. May the mountains gather about him now, in peace, always. What a tribute.
Yeah, it's the first time I've not slept a whole night, I think.
Well, I've had a few of them.
Long dark nights of the soul. I slept from 4 to 8 quite nicely. The problem was getting to 4 o'clock because there was a heck of a wind too. I mean,
Yeah.
the tents were rattling, but I was warm and dry.
I must have
so-
slept because I woke up sometimes. You know, I was thinking, God, I've never slept. I haven't slept, and then I'll go, oh, I must have been asleep. I think I get little snatches for like half an hour here and there. But I was very, very cold.
No,
My
I got-
feet were awful cold.
I got off for about 15 minutes till the polar bear came in the tent.
Trying to steal your scarf.
He wasn't looking for fish, that's for sure. So Norman gets the last laugh. We go
And that's the problem with the fishing. It's too cold. The fish are obviously feeding from the bottom, and we're flinging. Like there's nothing. There's not a fly on the surface, and then this arrives, black and red and silver. The trout must go, oh yeah, right. Oh, I fell for that one, Billy.
I think they're on the holidays.
And me only 5 pounds and knowing nothing about life at all. I got to this size eating things like that, Billy. Yeah, terrific. All the best.
No fish, but no regrets either. I've got something very valuable out of this trip and the Loch of the Green Corrie. It's kind of completed my picture of Norman. All these years I knew him in Edinburgh, all these long nights talking, drinking and playing. I knew how much Assynt meant to him, but I didn't know why. Now I think I do.
Who owns this landscape? Has owning anything to do with love? For it and I have a love affair, so nearly human we even have quarrels. I can't pretend it gets sick for me in my absence, though I get sick for it. Yet I love it with special gratitude, since it sends no letters, is never jealous, and expecting nothing from me gets nothing but cigarette packets and footprints. Who owns this landscape? The millionaire who bought it, or the poacher staggering downhill in the early morning with a deer on his back? Who possesses this landscape? The man who bought it, or I who am possessed by it?